Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. This is your show where you can put our property experts to task and see if they can answer your property questions. I'm Stephen Galpin, and joining me today are Kirsty Darkins, commercial property investor and mentor, and John Howard, property developer, investor, author and mentor too. Welcome to you both.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, what we're going to do is get straight on with the questioning. You're going first, Kirsty. Do the experts think that investment in commercial property will be a safer and more stable bet than residential at this time of possible recession?
I think the short answer is no. It's no safer than residential investment. It's just the same as any property investment in that you need to do your due diligence extremely well. You need to know what the risks are. You need to know what your appetite for risk is. So no, I don't think there's a huge difference in terms of risk level, but to be perfectly honest, I don't think the recession or recessionary environment is going to have a huge impact on commercial property investment. So COVID was harder for commercial property investment because the businesses were closed. There was even more uncertainty than there is now.
Well, it actually stopped people going to the shops, didn't
it did.
Yeah.
So, you know, it really impacted people's businesses. So I wouldn't necessarily say it was safer. I would say that commercial's already had most of the shocks it's going to have.
Yeah, good point.
And that over the last 2 years, businesses have built a great deal of resilience and have put themselves in a position to weather future storms. Whereas I suppose that's not as true in residential. So I think that's probably the key.
What are the figures like on sort of rent arrears and service charge arrears in the commercial sector now? Is it better than anticipated after COVID, or is it worse?
Yeah, so most rent arrears have been repaid that were accrued in COVID. Most people are paying their service charge. So there's still a few hangovers with some of the brands that are catching up slowly because they're trying to keep cash in their own pockets, not because they can't afford to pay it. But to be honest, in my experience, so my portfolio is mainly your smaller independent businesses. And they didn't rack any rent arrears up in the first place. Because it's their business, it's their livelihood, it's important to them. You know, they don't tend to, and I still have no rent arrears across retail and office.
On the
tenants.
retail side of things, I noticed in the newspapers the other day that Marks and Spencer, despite closing a number of their stores, were actually opening 50 odd new ones, which just to me just said that, well, there's perhaps been a realignment of thought in terms
well, they're not in high streets.
In presence. Yeah, well,
they're not in high streets. They're out of town and they're doubling their turnovers, aren't they?
I think that's the point. Are we going back to out of town now?
For fashion, yes. So people want convenience, and what's working for fashion is that you're either online, or if you're serving the older demographics, the likes of Marks and Spencer's and Next, for example, are doing very, very well out of the retail parks where the rents are lower. It's extremely convenient, but also for Marks and Spencer's it works particularly well because they've got their food offer with the rest of their retail offer. And so that's what really works for them on the retail park. So I think they've just changed their model in line with demand and how lazy we all are these days, to be honest.
I think also a lot of their stores are very old in town. You know, I'm looking at 2 of their stores now to buy them, and they're in very poor condition. So I mean, they all needed revamping. A lot of them do, and out of town is sadly
and it's
the way
to relocate and
absolutely.
And revamp. Yeah,
definitely.
But I mean,
and they also own most of their stores in town. They own them themselves as well,
right.
So they're selling them.
But I mean, again, you know, reading the papers, they say that our London mayor is absolutely crucifying London retail because of his attitude to transport, cars in particular. I don't know, what do you think about that?
It definitely has an impact on retail. So what I always say to people looking to invest in commercial for the first time maybe is, you know, accessibility, parking, if you're investing in high street locations and retail, is key. Without it, the retail doesn't work. And it's just a fact. So if you can't drive there and you can't park easily, or the parking charges are extortionate, then you will slowly kill off trade in that location, and it doesn't work.
I mean, I live here in, I won't say central London.
Really?
East London. Yeah. But I mean, I've had a new car for 6 months, and I think I've just done 500
Yeah,
miles.
well, you still haven't come down to Ipswich for lunch, so what do you expect?
Well, don't you fall off the end of the world?
No, you don't. No.
All right, lovely. Okay, let's move on. John, your question. This is an interesting one for a developer. Do the development experts think that the publicised problems for some of the online-only agents, and we won't mention any particular colours there,
No.
will result in their demise? Or will New Homes Market welcome and support such operations for sale of their products?
Well, I own 6 estate agencies across Norfolk, so I'm relatively well placed to answer this, I suppose. So when the online agencies started up, everyone was pretty concerned. They were estimating that half the business will be done by online agents within 5 years or something like that. Well, none of that has happened whatsoever. The online agents all to start with wanted to charge up front, and that's never worked in a estate agency ever. No sell, no fee is obviously the sound bite, if you like, for all agents. They weren't giving a very good service. A lot of them employed self-employed people who had been probably in other agencies and were no longer working there for one reason or another, to put it quite bluntly. So what's happened over the last few years is that there's been a decline. The shares of one very big organisation have gone, I think, down tenfold. I mean, you can pick the shares up for virtually nothing now. In a strong property market, they survive, some of them, because, you know, people are putting property on. As long as you could put it on one of the portals, you know, you could sell it virtually. Now the job's changed. You've got to be, now it's ideal for the professional estate agent who knows what they're doing, because you have to work at it and do the job properly. And of course, none of these online agencies have got that ability. So, you know, they might end up being 1 or 2 still, but I think the decline is pretty rapid. And I'm very pleased about that.
I mean, John, years ago, I used to work for one of London's leading chartered surveyors.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh.
And our agency division always had, what I would call a typical agency situation, which is, in a good market, you're really just an order taker. Where the skill really comes in is in the bad times, when you've got to have people there who have to spend their day explaining why they haven't sold somebody's property,
but also
and come out of it with some results.
But also, Stephen, sales progression is so important.
Yeah.
So progressing the sale is half the job. And I got quoted by a director of one of the big online agencies a while ago who said, "We don't bother doing that, John, because we know all the other agents in the chain do it for us. Because if they don't do it, they don't get their sale either." And that's a terrible attitude, but that's honestly what he said.
Yes, but I think all these online agencies are now beginning to moderate their aspirations, aren't they? In terms
Well,
of
some of them are now
share.
not charging any money up front and all sorts, but they can't survive on you. And as an estate agent, you cannot survive on charging £1,000 fee or £1,500. You just can't.
But
it's not possible.
Again, going back to days I worked in agency, I mean, I seem to remember that the figures were something like, at that time, you know, to take on an instruction of a residential property, it probably cost you £500, £600, £700 by the time you paid photographers, you've gone on the portal.
Yeah. If I said to you, Stephen, that our average, we spend on average per house £4,200 to sell it.
Really?
That's what our overheads are. Yeah. So you can see why it's an expensive business running estate agencies.
Have you got anything to add to that, Kirsty?
I think just from an investor and seller's perspective, really, because I never hold any residential, we sell it, but we create flats, we convert into houses and flip those on. And we haven't had very good experiences, particularly, we did try one online estate agent and we're never doing that again, because there's no level of service. There's no one to talk to.
There's no talent there, is there?
No, there isn't. And you need to, I think we want to know who is selling our products and who they're selling it to. And we want to be able to look them in the eye and work out, well, who are you? Are you the sort of person that we can work with? Do you understand us? Do you, and so on. And I think that's what people want when they're selling homes.
Property is a personal business, you know. It's not
absolutely.
I mean, just to underline that, I mean, I've got my flat on the market here, and the other day I had a call. Oh, could we show somebody around your apartment? So, well, who is it?
It needs
what
to
is it?
be tidied up first, doesn't it?
No. The last one I sold, a lady came in and said, "What a lovely apartment, but nobody lives here, do they?"
It's very sad.
So tidy. You've seen my apartment,
I
anyway,
have.
you know.
Very nice.
But anyway, this girl said to me, "Oh, I don't know really. I just promised to show this person around Canary Wharf, and I thought I'd show them yours." So I said, "Well, when you have a qualified buyer,
exactly.
When you've done some kind of investigation into their ability to buy,
pay,
just let me know." And she was really quite offended and didn't understand my view at all. But you know,
well, that's playing the numbers game, isn't it? Rather than actually having a proactive attitude.
Well, again, that comes again to another sort of agency sort of ethos, isn't it? Where some agents will say, tell the vendor anything to get it on the books, because unless it's on the books,
and then work it down over the next 3 months price wise. Who would have ever done that in the past? I can't believe it, Stephen.
No, we can't believe it. All right, well, thank you both for all of that. That's all we've got time for in this half of the show, so join me again after the break when we'll be asking Kirsty and John to answer more of your questions. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time with John Howard and Kirsty Darkins. Welcome back, guys.
Thank you.
John.
Yes.
With a shortage of housing stock, do the panel think that the Green Belt policy is actually sustainable, given that it seems where it suits, government overrides it, as in the case of HS2?
Goodness me, that's a big question, Stephen. I mean, Green Belt came into existence, I think, in 1948 or 1952, something like that. And it was to protect the beautiful English countryside. That's what it's for. But when they did it, they also included lots of areas that aren't very pretty, aren't in very nice areas. A very short, quick story is when I owned Cambridge United Football Stadium, we looked to relocate them. And we found a site outside Cambridge, which was an ex rubbish tip. Guess what? It was in Greenbelt. And do you know what the only thing you can build in Greenbelt is?
No.
It's a park and ride. So a council can build a park and ride, tarmac it completely. How mad is that?
But what about HS2?
Well, HS2, if you want to take it out of Greenbelt, you go to Secretary of State for Environment, and that's a big, big, big job to do that. So when you see a site that's in Greenbelt and an agent tells you, oh, that'll be all right, you can build on that, good luck, because that's a very expensive job to do, and you're likely to fail. Now, they are looking to change the Greenbelt slightly, but of course, every time you try and change anything, all the NIMBYs come out and say, not in London, because there's no green space in London, but everywhere else where we like the countryside and we're proud to live in beautiful places like Suffolk, we don't want the green belt changed particularly, unless it's a silly green belt like my situation in Cambridge was, where, you know, it's a tip, for goodness sake. It was a tip for 50 odd, 60 odd years prior to probably green belt coming in, but they still made it green belt because they wanted to protect the whole of Cambridge.
Okay.
Yeah.
So shall we try and answer the question then?
I did answer the question. I'm not a politician.
Is it sustainable?
The pressure on Greenbelt is intense. So I think the government are looking at it, and it will change. But on the whole, I think the majority of it will stay because there's a good reason for it. If we built on greenfields, brownfield sites at the moment in this country, we wouldn't need to use any extra countryside.
John, I'm always a bit puzzled when I read about these housing shortages, you know, and we've got to build 300,000.
500,000 actually.
Whatever it is. Well, two things. I always wonder when the government say, who do they mean by who's going to build it? What, we're going to build it? Who's that then? Rishi and Hunt are going to go out?
Well, at the moment, this year is going to be a big problem. Well, next year is going to be a big problem, I should say.
But John, where does this shortage come from?
Okay, it comes from the amount of people that want to live in the UK That's the main shortage. It comes from the amount of
what are you
people
saying?
that want to
Immigration
live.
is
One of the issues, not the only issue.
Isn't it the way we live as well now, though? Because more and more people live on their own. Therefore, you need more property. So more people used to live in multi-generational families. And
at the end
of
the day, the best thing for estate agents and property developers is divorce.
Yeah.
Because people buy a house, they sell 2 for 1 every time, and they might do it 2 or 3 times. So, that makes a huge difference. But the problem at the moment is these major house builders are shutting up shop this year. So they only built 210 houses last year.
But I'm
so next year they've got no chance of getting to that, and they want to get to 300. The truth is they need 500.
But I'm just thinking our population has not grown that significantly over a specifically short time, has it?
Well, we're a very wealthy country, and a lot of people can afford to live on their own. But also, the other thing is, this country is unique with building society and lending institutions. There's no country like it in the world to have all these societies that lend on property at such a low interest rate. And even now it's gone up. It's still very low for most, relatively low. So we are in a unique position, and people in this country are taught from a very young age, buy a property because it's a good investment.
And do you think it still is?
Yes, I think long term, it's a fantastic investment.
What do you think, Kirsty?
I think it depends on location, personally. So, I'm from the Midlands, and I have a lot of friends and family in the north as well. I wouldn't say it's always a great investment there. There's been hardly any increase in capital value over a long period of time. And if you've got a mortgage around your neck, it's a liability. And I'd rather rent where I live for flexibility, for example, and then invest.
Kirsty,
that's the way I live, though, John.
I can never understand that. At the end of the day, if you've got a mortgage over 25 years, if nothing else, it's good discipline, and you'll own that outright eventually.
But I don't want the responsibility of maintaining that property. So I'm a person that doesn't like a lot of responsibility in life. So I want to be free and flexible, not have an illiquid asset that I have to maintain.
With all due respect, you've got big assets, and big problems come with big assets. As simple as that, property assets.
But
you are responsible because you're running all those businesses.
John, I tell you what now, when I've sold my flat here, you're
going to come and rent one at Ipswich, what are you going to do?
I will rent next time because I want that flexibility that Kirsty talks about.
What is wrong with people? I can't believe it. Really? You honestly, a property man, a chartered surveyor?
It's like look, it's like that you get on the continent, people say no.
You'll be living in Europe next.
We want the flexibility of being able to move, relocate with our job, go to somewhere more pleasant or whatever else. And a lot of the big firms, you know this yourself, a lot of the big firms, think of one of the big credit card companies, for instance, they will never buy an office block or whatever. They take a lease, and they say, we've taken that lease because we've got a get out clause, and we can move anytime the economic circumstances change.
Stephen, property's been fantastic for you as an investment over the years. Let's be honest. It's been very living. Our generation have earned a lot of tax-free money out of owning a property.
You can, but Stephen's question on that point was, do you think it's a good investment to own your own home? And my answer is not always. It depends on location.
That's a really irresponsible answer. Kirsty,
no, but again, John,
for most people, owning your own home is the aim and the ambition, and it's a great aim and ambition. But John, and also, of course, they vote Tory then.
John, when you can also run into trouble with this, I see so many young people going for this 50-50 shared ownership, and I cover my eyes because they're just heading for trouble.
Shared ownership is a good idea, but it's badly thought out. But it's a good idea in principle.
Well, we'll see. All right, okay, Kirsty, we'll leave John with that one, shall we? and get on with our next question. I would like to invest in commercial property, but as it is in general more expensive than residential, are there any opportunities to take, shall we say, part shares or participate in shared ownership?
Well, I think there's two things there. So I would dispute that it's in general more expensive than residential. So I think that's a perception, and it depends what part of the market you're looking at investing in. So you can start in the same place in the right location as you can start in residential in terms of how much you invest. I started myself when I started buying commercial property with 100,000. So you can start at the lower end. It doesn't have to be more expensive.
Well, I suppose really, are there any schemes that I suppose the inference is anything other than buying shares in a commercial property company? Are there any sort of I don't know.
Yeah, it's like an insurance schemes or investment bonds that then buy commercial.
Yeah, so you can
invest. Almost you could put crowdfunding into that, couldn't you?
Yeah, almost, so you could pension investing. You can buy shares in property funds.
Yeah, it's good.
Buy shares in property funds if you want to start investing in property, but not do it yourself and not be responsible. Those are the ways to really. And
I suppose you raise a good point actually that unlike residential, you can put commercial property into a pension.
You can, and so that's a great place for a lot of people to start if you've not got liquid capital available, but you have got pension sat there or multiple pension pots that aren't really doing very much for you right now. If you amalgamated it, you can invest it directly into commercial, and that could be building you a nice retirement.
Yes. But it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, when people sort of generally, if you're out and about talking to people, you talk about property investment, they automatically swing to the residential, don't they? They don't think about commercial.
I think it's easier to fund residential, isn't it? To be fair,
it is easier to fund residential, yes, via lending. So you do have to be more creative. You have to have access to liquid capital to fund commercial to add value to it.
And would a lender on commercial property expect you to have perhaps more experience than if you were buying to buy to let, for instance? Yeah,
they generally do want you to have experience of investing in property. So you don't necessarily have to have the commercial experience, but they want you to have a background of investing in a form of property, because commercial is seen as a more sophisticated strategy, and you've got different set of property law, different tenancies, there's a lot of moving parts in commercial that aren't perhaps there in residential.
Well, that's a good recommendation for things we often say on here, John, isn't it? Get a good team around you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good advice.
Don't do it on your own.
Good consultants. Very important.
Okay, well, that's all we've got time for in this show. So a big thank you to Kirsty Darkins and John Howard. I'm Stephen Galpin. I look forward to seeing you next time on Property Question Time.